Hello, and welcome back. Okay. We don't have too many of these little vignettes to see before I imagine the story wraps up. But there's still some pieces missing in some of my theory crafting, which is, namely, Dawn's story, Edie's story, some of Edith's, most up-to-date conclusions about what she feels about all of this. Because we're sort of going through the timeline of what she discovered, which is mirroring whoever we are right now discovering these things. Which I guess that hasn't totally been confirmed yet either. But we're sort of catching up to what does Edith think, like, as of the writing of this journal that we've been experiencing. So let's continue through our journey in the house.
He was so proud of being Indian. I think for him, it was a way to be something other than just a Finch.
Yeah, it does seem like the story we saw about Lewis, very much a crisis of identity to the point of major dissociation. But it seems like it wasn't just the lifestyle that he was living, but it really weighed on him who he was in the context of family and what kind of life that meant he would likely have. Okay, let's continue.
On the way back from Lewis's funeral, my mom told me to start packing. She waited until the day before we left to tell Edie.
So maybe Edith didn't, run away. I kind of had the impression that she left home because she seems like somewhat estranged from Mom, but that was when I thought that I was being her as a teenager. Like, if we were Edith, as a 16-year-old coming into this story, to me it would have made sense that she's only coming back now that Mom has passed away. But I guess knowing that they left together, there's time that they could have spent with Edith growing up away from the house. Mom passes away, Edith comes and visits. So now what is the thing that is triggering Edith's child to come visit? That's what I'm curious about.
I'm not sure if she wanted to make it easier or harder. I wish we'd stayed.
Okay, this is breaking down some of my ideas. Yeah, because...
But I understand why we left.
As much as there was a lot of pain wrapped up in this place, Edith has such a fondness for it. And such a fondness for her family. Despite everything.
My mom ended up leaving everything behind. What happened that night had been coming for a long time. Maybe it should have come sooner.
What happened? Was it Edie passing away or something? Or something else?
But it had to end one way or another. All that's left now is to tell you about that last night.
I'm on the edge of my fucking seat, man. Like, there's so many questions in my mind about how this all comes together. Okay.
That whole last day, Edie just watched us pack and didn't say a word. Until supper, when she raised her glass and said,
"To our final night together, and all our final nights apart."
Grandma, you know what I said about alcohol. Some of your medications are very
Edith,
specific.
I left a present for you in the hallway. Why don't you go open it? The grown-ups have to argue now.
I'm sorry, you're right. We're all leaving tomorrow. Let's just enjoy our last...
I'm not leaving.
Edith, you're excused.
This isn't making sense now. Now I'm confused.
the power had been shut off that morning, but Edie always had plenty of candles. When my mom sealed the library, I don't think she knew about the other entrance. Or that Edie had a key to it.
I'm really confused now.
That thing you're afraid of isn't going to end when you leave the house.
So Mom really thinks it is a part of this place.
Edith has a right to know these stories.
My children are dead because of your stories.
Because of
I
the
think it's best
stories.
If Edith and I leave tonight. We'll have the nursing home send a van for you in the morning. Okay?
History of the Finches.
Dear Edith, there's so many stories I wish I could tell you, but there's only time for one. This is about what happened on the night you were born. That night, the tide went way, way out. It was the first and last time I ever saw the old house aground.
I'm sorry. I'm so distracted by like what's happening in my mind, like my understanding of things. Because didn't Edith say like she first came back to this house when she was 22 weeks pregnant or something?
There'd been an earthquake out in the middle of the ocean.
I'm going to stop speculating and just see what happens.
In 1,000 years. God, it smelled awful. You know, I've seen that house every day of my life. But I never thought I'd go back to it.
So this is the old
When the
house.
fog rolled in, I lost my way. I got turned around. For a while, I wandered. I started seeing things. Things I'd forgotten had ever existed. But when I saw lot of things came back to me.
So Edie was having her own rediscovery journey.
Or maybe I came back to them. Things I can't explain, but that I need you to try and...
Edith, what are you doing in here?
It's mine.
Edith!
Mom, you're gonna rip it! Let go! I kicked and screamed, but Mom dragged me to the car.
Jeez. So she doesn't know what happened.
I never saw Great-Grandma Edie again. The next morning, the band came to pick her up, but she was already gone. After that, we moved around a lot. We both tried to make the best of it. A few years went by.
Oh, I love that. It's so good, the visuals.
We could talk about it. But she started getting sick a lot. The rest happened pretty quickly. She got better for a while, and then she didn't. And then I was alone. The last Finch left alive. Until I found out about you. I'm still not sure what to tell you about all this. If we lived forever, maybe we'd have time to understand things. But as it is, I think the best we can do is try to open our eyes and appreciate how strange and brief all of this is. This journal was supposed to be for you. But now I hope you'll never see it. I just want to meet you and tell you all these stories myself. But I guess if you're reading this now, things didn't work out that way. This is where your story begins. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it. It's a lot to ask, but I don't want you to be sad that I'm gone. I want you to be amazed that any of us ever had a chance to be here at all. Good luck.
One last Okay, so at the beginning of this story, I kind of felt like Edie was a positive influence on Edith. You know, like I had said at the very beginning, this like use of metaphor to help a child understand something tragic kind of made sense when it's framed as like Mom's the bad actor and Edie was like the fun grandmother. But when I combine everything that I've seen now, I mean, it was Edie who locked Molly away and led her to like whatever happened to her, you know, like the starvation or falling out of the window or whatever it was. And like accident or not, you know, good intentions or not, like that is neglect, right? That is a completely preventable source of suffering. And I wonder, in a similar way that like I was talking about Dawn losing Milton and Lewis kind of like started to rewire her mind in some ways, like in the traumatic ways that grief can. I wonder if that like caused Edie to develop like this sort of fantastical way of explaining death, not as like a healthy way of coping with it and communicating it to a child, but like as her own form of denial to it. There was that line that Edith talked about that was like, maybe we wanted to believe it was a curse so that we could have some meaning behind it, or she said something to that effect. And like maybe that's where Edith got started with, there's this curse and there's all these fantastical things, because how else do you explain the death of Molly when she was neglected? And that was a completely preventable situation. Now you have all these people who grow up with, stories about why people around them seem to be passing away, this family lineage. And Dawn, by her nature, is more of like a scientific method thinker, raised by Sam, very structured, sort of combating that with the ideas that Edie has about her family history. Like, that must have been really confusing to try to make sense of all of that. And developing a very complicated way of trying to cope with things. As much as I thought that Edie's storytelling was like a way of keeping the family lineage alive in some ways, maybe it was like a way of explaining away some of the mental health issues that these people were suffering from. Calling Walter's situation like a mole man, never telling Edith that a family member lives below the house, like that's horrific. Maybe Dawn was like, really trying to protect Edith from, like we saw at that scene where she was taking the journal away from her. Okay, as a child, it's whatever, you're explaining these things by metaphor, but at some point you are going to be an adult and you can't just believe these stories. Like, to safely integrate the loss of your family members, like, it's important that you know what really happened. The fantastical version of the stories can sort of, like, in a way, harm your ability to safely integrate, the realistic experience of loss. Mom losing her own kids seemed to go back and forth maybe on, like, the curse or, just unfortunate circumstances. And obviously we didn't get a real, like, definitive answer to that, but I think thematically there's, elements of, like, ways that we cope with death in the right context can be helpful, but they can also be a denial in a different context. And how we tell stories about our family and the ways that we survive these generational struggles can really impact those relationships. Like, it's clear that Dawn did not want more of Edie to sort of rub off on Edith. And from Edith's childhood perspective, that maybe looks like Dawn is, the overbearing mother who's trying to keep me from fun grandma, who seems to be the only fucking person who's happy. But what we just saw in that scene was, like, not happiness, it was denial. Edie was, like, cutting Mom off when she was trying to warn her about the medication thing. Like, it's denial. It's denial of, like, so many things. Denial of her responsibility for Molly's death. Her responsibility for hiding Walter and, like, maybe even putting it in his mind with this whole curse stuff, that's the only way he was going to survive. Like, God, there's so much going on here. Was it like, was denial the reason that Edie stayed alive so long? I don't know. I don't know if there's a direct translation of, like, why she stayed alive, Maybe there is no specific reason. But it's clear that, keeping these versions of the stories in the family was damaging to some of them. It maybe have removed people's ability to process things in a healthy way. And, I'm thinking of specifically like Lewis in that sense, and maybe also some of the others now that I think about it. Like, does Edie's pushing of the whole curse thing and like a fantastical denial of mental health make it easier for Lewis to develop this like very unhealthy detachment from reality? I don't know. It's clear though that like, Edie probably didn't recognize what depression looks like, either in herself or in anyone else. And if you come up with these ways of denying the depression that you feel, then of course you don't have to grieve properly. And that can do a lot of damage internally, but also to the environment and how that affects everyone else who has to live in that environment. I've seen this. I've seen how people can surround themselves in a cage of grief where they feel like it's honoring the family member to have all of their stuff still around and pictures of them up and like just freeze them in time. Like, I can't ever put any of this stuff away because that would be dishonoring their memory, but it's also like re-traumatizing yourself constantly. And I can imagine like for someone like Sam, seeing his brother's bedroom that way, and for all of these kids to have that stuff. In one sense, it's like really traumatic, but maybe also healing for, right, like Edith and her child sort of revisiting this stuff. What a brilliant handling of all of these themes, like so nuanced, and threading them with the finesse of a master seamstress. Like, I don't know if I feel like the story really has a definitive conclusion about like who is at fault here, because that's not really the interest of the subject of generational trauma. Like, that's the point. It's generational. It's been happening systemically in a family, and if you want to look at it in one dimension, you'll say, well, so-and-so could have raised someone else better. Dawn should have raised Edith better. Well, Dawn was under the influence of different perspectives that helped and hindered her in some way, her ability to like rationalize, but then also process emotions. Edie, a lot of denial, and that's very harmful for Dawn and Edith and everyone else. But I mean, it doesn't seem like malicious. It seems like fearful, like the fear of accepting what happened, what she did to Molly and what her influence has wrought on the rest of the family. Like, it's just fucking complicated. Like, that's it. That's the only conclusion I can come to, is what a tragic scenario. And it doesn't really have a distinct conclusion, but neither does life. But I think it did ultimately land like sort of where I hoped it would, which was like kind of an optimistic view on the importance of telling stories, including those that are of the fantastical nature, because as much as they are not what really happened, like Molly didn't really turn into a cat, she died of something that was preventable, that someone was responsible for. Child was neglected. That one seems the most clear to me out of the others. The fact that the stories were told and was important to how people were shaped, it's important to include that they were told. Like, it's important to caveat them as well, that there's more than just that perspective. And I think that was what Dawn was trying to do, like in the classroom, was sort of handle that with nuance, right? Like, obviously they're living with Edie. She doesn't want her kids to think that grandma is a villain. So she's sort of presenting, these family stories, and you have to be aware that there's a curse because that idea has shaped us, but also ask rigorous questions in these sorts of ideas. And I think that ultimately where the story lands, Edith's perspective was able to sort of finally integrate. It's important that we understand where these ideas came from, but maybe it's less about coming to a conclusion about what was fact and what was fiction, and more about understanding the people who were in these stories, because we'll never know what was fact or fiction. But through these experiences, we can come to know, at least partially, why some of these people made the decisions that they made. And it's hard to say, where responsibility lies, because it is a systemic generational issue. There are points of responsibility along the way, absolutely, that people didn't answer for, and they suffered the consequences. It seems like Edie may have been so blind to some of this stuff that what did mom say? Like, you shouldn't mix alcohol and medication. So she probably got poisoned or something, poisoned herself, purposefully or not purposefully. I think the denial of real fucking things cause death, and sometimes it really is just a tragedy. The idea that it was a curse kept her thinking that it's going to have to be something strange. Or I don't know. I kind of like that it leaves it up to us to sort of process. And it also has me thinking about, I don't know, I guess my own family history and what's going to be left of all of us, If I suddenly wasn't here, for some reason, out of nowhere, what impression do I leave behind? What have I left to sort of tell that story? Well, I mean, I've talked about it openly before that I really have a strong attachment to the ideas of terror management theory, that the ideas of legacy and these sorts of things are how you sort of bear with the anxiety that your life will end at some point. And, I do see this channel is one of those pieces of my immortality project, is what terror management theory might call it. At the end of the day, you have to decide, how are you going to make meaning of things? And I think that the fact that everything is temporary is one of the driving forces behind that search for meaning, which is kind of what Edith pointed out as well, which is how strange is it that we're anything at all, and how temporary this is, and how fragile life is, and we're all going to have to make peace with that eventually.